Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Soulcast Media live event. If everybody can see me and hear me okay, please give me a thumbs up on your end. This is how I know and I can make sure all the tech is working. You can also write a yes in the chat function just so I know you can see me. Sometimes with the internet and doing these virtual events, sometimes you don't know what is going to happen on the tech side. So again, if you can see me and you can hear me all right, please give me a thumbs up on your end. I'm so thrilled to be here with you all today. And let me just share with you, if there's any tech things that, sometimes I know with these LinkedIn lives, it can suddenly go back and refresh to the very beginning, even though we are live. If you experience that, simply just refresh your browser, whether you're on your computer or on your phone, and it should take you back live because yes, we are live right now. So, like I said, thank you all for the thumbs up and for the yes. I'm so glad to see that the tech is working. Okay. So now that we got this out of the way, I just want to say welcome. We have over 100 of you here right now, which is so amazing because we're going to be talking about building your career brand. Now, I just want to say really quickly that this was supposed to be a fireside chat with Michelle Wong, but she couldn't attend, meaning I didn't want to cancel this because I still wanted to talk about building a career brand. So instead of it being a Q&A, I was like, why don't we just do a workshop style event? This is actually one of my most popular topics when it comes to the workshops that I do. I do a lot of workshop trainings with teams from all over the world. A lot of it's virtual. And I will tell you, this topic of building your career brand, it's probably one of my most requested, in addition to my mastering public speaking skills one, because career brand is something that we have to think about. And perhaps you're here today because you're like, that's interesting. Career brand. I feel like it's something I need to think about, but maybe you're like, I don't know where to start. So let me tell you, you're here at the right place because we're going to be talking all about it. And like I said, because this is a workshop style, you can just take down notes as I'm going through this. So let's get started. You all have been waiting for a while. So we are here today because we're talking about building your career brand. And this session I'm going to share, it's going to go by pretty darn fast. I've divided my time into a part 1 and a part 2. So the first part of our time here together today is I'm going to first share some challenges. Challenges in the workplace of why is it sometimes hard for us to build and think about our career brand. I think a lot about this because of course I teach it, but I realize a lot of it is we weren't taught to think about our career brand. Sometimes when you think about school, right? You go to school, you learn, you have you learn technical skills, but there's not so much of school that teaches you to think strategically about how you should position yourself. So, we're going to talk about why some of these challenges exist. And this is important because it'll set the foundation for how we can reframe it. When we reframe it, this is how now we can think a bit more strategically of how we want to position ourselves. And then, part 2 of our time here today is I'm going to share with you strategies and communication tactics because communications is what I teach. So, of course, everything will always link back to communications because it's not just about learning the theories or concepts. For me, we have to get real tactical. We have to get real prescriptive, meaning I'm going to share with you what you can say and how you can say it so people know what your career brand is because it's not enough for you just to know it. You have to be able to express it. So, let me share a little bit about who I am before we jump into this content. If this is the first time we are meeting, hello, I'm so glad you're here and you're here at one of our Soulcast Media live events. I host these on LinkedIn every other week, meaning every other week is a brand new topic. It's always something communications related, but a lot of it has to do with career and how you can be a better communicator. I host workshops on public speaking skills. And like I said, I do a lot of like fireside chats with amazing thought leaders here on LinkedIn because this is the thought leadership platform. Now, I'm a global communications expert. I'm a top voice here on LinkedIn. And I'm so proud to say that I've taught over 2 million people now how to improve their communication skills. It's such an honor. It's such a privilege to be able to share my expertise. And the reason why I talk about communications was because when I first started my career, I was actually on TV. I was a television journalist, and I was a television journalist for about 10 years. I share this story all the time. When I first started working, I was terrible at communications. Now, part of it is because of a bit of a personality. I'm fairly shy, introverted, and timid. So, to be honest, I didn't know how to communicate well and effectively because learning how to write essays and the communications that you learn, for example, in school, is not necessarily the communications that you need to use at work. Do you feel this? If you do, you can just like put an emoji or just say yes. You quickly realize when you start working, and especially the higher up you go, you're like, wow, communications actually is really about strategy. It has to do with how you present the information. All those skills of you learning how to like put together arguments, write those long essays. It's actually the opposite. You have to be able to be concise. You have to be precise, right? So as you can imagine, it was like a huge culture shock when I first started working, especially on TV, because you're suddenly surrounded by all these extroverted, very well spoken people. So I had to learn these skills really fast. So after about 10 years, and winning an Emmy Award, I was like, wait a second, I can teach a lot of what I learned on TV to professionals just like you. So the fact that you are all here, to me, it makes me go, okay, communications is important and we're ready to learn. One of the really exciting things, and I'm not sharing too much yet because it's still in the works. I do have a book coming out next year, published by the Penguin Random House team, that has to do with communications, but really why for many of us, sometimes it's so hard to get out of our shell to be a better communicator. Be sure to follow me here on LinkedIn because I'm going to be talking about that book in a lot more detail, probably a little bit more in the coming months. But right now, it's still on the DL. But I just want to share it with you all that this is what we're working on. So that's a little bit about me, who I am, and why do I put together these events? I put together these events because I think the things we're talking about today, career brand, these are the things that we need to be thinking about if we want to be more strategic in the workplace. So, if you're ready, let's get started. And again, I'm so thrilled that you are here. So, today you're going to see that I'm going to be presenting using the software. So, you'll see me as well as a text here on the side. I love starting out my workshops with an activity. And this activity is a great way for us to get into this mindset of thinking about career brand. So, what I'm going to ask you all to do is, as you're watching, whether you're on your phone or on your computer, to open up the chat function here right now, because I have a series of questions for you. And these questions are meant to get you thinking about career brand. So, this is actually a very fun activity. It's not like a super serious like business activity. It's actually a fun activity, but it's very much relevant to what we're going to be talking about today. So, what you're going to see here on your screen are going to be some images. Yes, you're going to see some logos. And when you see this logo pop up here on your screen, I want you to write in the chat function, what do you think? What comes to mind? Now, go with your gut instinct. Don't think too hard about it, but I just want you to give me your first impression when you see this. All right? So, let's start with the first one that you should see here on your screen. Do you see it? When you see this logo, what comes to mind? Put it into the chat function. Like I said, there is no right or wrong answer. This is what you think of when you see this image. What comes to mind when this image pops up? Put into the chat function. And like I said, don't think too hard about it. This is a fun activity, but it's very, very much relevant to what we're talking about today. So I'm seeing a lot of the different comments come in. Let's see. Alessandra, you're saying Apple, Lily, Apple. Okay. So it's probably the brand, right? Or it could be truly just you're thinking an apple, like the fruit. Let's see. Branding, Apple, frictionless sugar. I like that. Dan, you're saying quality and innovative, serious and modern. Natalie, Olivia, expensive. I don't doubt that. I'm a Mac user, and it's kind of like one of those things. Like for me, I have this conversation with my husband all the time because he's an Android user. I don't know if we have any Android folks here, but we're always talking about which is better. This is like one of the topics because I'm a Mac, an Apple person, and he is not. Anyways, a lot of different things. Lily, you're saying innovative, Apple, Taylor, integration, security, simplicity, proprietary. Lisa, simple. Oh my gosh. Hamand, an apple with a bite. You're being really literal here, and that's great. All right, this is awesome. Okay, let's go into the next image. This is the image that you should see here on your screen right now, and I want you to tell me, what do you think? When you see this image pop up on your screen, what do you think? I'm not going to say anything because I want you to look at this and I want you to write what's the word, maybe a feeling that you get when you see this. But when you see this logo, what comes to mind? John, you're being like, this is Nike. Absolutely. Let's see. Bex, you're saying the underdog. Interesting. Okay. Nike. So many of you are just saying like what this brand is. Eric, you're saying shoes. Absolutely. Let's see. Michael Jordan. Yes, absolutely. Probably one of their earliest brand ambassadors, right? Sports, the Nike logo, just do it, swoosh, right? A lot of you are actually saying the what's that saying? Just do it. Gosh, that is so like we think about that, right? When we see this. The outlet store, Lily, I love it. Laura, you're saying empowerment. Alessandra, sneakers. Dave, again, Nike. Christopher, you're saying it's expensive. Absolutely. A lot of these brands, because they're now global brands, sometimes it can be quite pricey. Absolutely. Longevity, Terry. I love it. I love it. Okay, this is great. Now, this is the last image I'm going to show you. And again, I want to get your thoughts on this. This is kind of a fun activity. I like doing this because it's very much relevant to what we're talking about today. This is the last logo. Do you see it? You see it here on your screen? When you see this logo, this image, what comes to mind? I feel like this is one of the most classic images that you see that everybody finds at the airport no matter where you're traveling. Actually, a few months ago, my husband and I, we were vacationing in Bali, and I think the airport, like right off we got off the plane in Bali, it was this. We're like, well, that's comforting, right? Okay, so what are we seeing? We're seeing Dan, you're saying coffee, Marie Eve, morning. Alona, smell. Tiffany, joy. I love that. Alyssa, favorite, everyday luxury. Morning addiction. Oh my goodness. You're all cracking me up. Oh my goodness. Okay. Stability. Mario, you're saying it's expensive. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Lifestyle, coffee, American gold standard for coffee. Let's see. A lot of you are saying such it's interesting kind of like the variety. I'm just kind of scrolling through the chat function. It's so fascinating to see the variety of the answers. And this is what I want to say. Everything that you're saying, you're right. Like these are the things that just pop into your mind when these brands and these logos and these images come to mind. Amanda, you're saying it's my morning routine. Absolutely. It's kind of like you go your Starbucks run, maybe you do it on your mobile app, right? So, okay, first of all, thank you. I look at Dave, you're sharing. Is that your preferred strawberries and cream frappuccino? We're taking orders now here, right? I'm just kidding. Okay. So, first of all, thank you. Thank you all for participating in this activity because the reason why I like to start off with this more fun activity whenever I talk about career brand is this. We talked about the Apple brand. We talked about the Nike brand. We know that this is the Starbucks brand. These are global brands, right? We see it, they're everywhere. And what I love about this exercise is this. These companies, they are so absolutely strategic and intentional and consistent with their messaging, which is why everything that you wrote in the chat, whether it was again that Apple, the Nike, or the Starbucks, when you saw these images, you instantly knew and you recognized it. So, just as much as these brands, and they spend, of course, millions of dollars on their marketing and ad budget, their PR, to make sure that when consumers, we're the consumers, right? When we as consumers see it, we immediately know and can recognize, and we're thinking all the different things that you just said, right? They're pouring lots of budget into this. And the reason why I share this is because, yes, even though we're not thinking about ourselves as having a marketing budget, we have to also actually take some inspiration from how they think about branding them as an organization to how we can think about how we brand ourselves when we're at work. Because here's the thing, when it comes to our work, we have to think about how people perceive us. What do they think of us? But the thing is, when it comes to the work that we do and how we're known, many times we leave it to chance. You see it here. I have this question mark. We leave it to chance of how people think of us, what roles and projects we're given, and we leave it to chance. And why is that a problem? Well, the problem with that is sometimes if you just say yes to all the things that people tell you to do, what happens? You become boxed into this role of, oh, Jessica is just the person who's really good at putting together that Excel spreadsheet. I'm happy to help the team and put together that Excel spreadsheet, but I want to be known more than that. By the way, does any of that resonate with you where you feel sometimes because you say yes by default, because maybe it's in your nature to want to make people happy, to please other people, that sometimes you get thrown work you just don't want to do? If that resonates with you, feel free to just type in that yes, or it's like, absolutely, I totally resonate with that. I feel that, which is why we're here today to talk about thinking about career brand. Because right now, many of us probably leave it to chance. But the reason why I shared all those brands earlier is because just as much as those companies were very intentional, strategic, and consistent with how they are perceived in the market, we got to think about it too. Meaning, when people hear our name, when they hear Mario, Dan, Jason, right? Stephanie, Jessica, Serene, right? I'm just saying, some of you who are here right now, when they hear your name, what do they think? You want to make sure that they're thinking about you the way you want to be thought of. What does this mean? So, when they hear our name, they should know, what is it that we care about? What is it that we're doing? The impact that we're making. Again, we're not just a person who is a hard worker, we're much more than that. Do they know what is our differentiating factor? This is what I call our career brand. Because right now, like I said, many of us, we fully plan to bring our best selves to work. There's no doubt about that. We show up to work and we want to do work. I firmly believe in the positive side that we don't go to work because we want to slack off. We want to go to work and we want to do good work. But it's not just doing good work. It's also, what do people perceive when we do come into work? That is our career brand, and that is what we're talking about today. So let me ask you all a really quick question. Put it into the chat. Have you ever thought about building your career brand even before you attended and registered for this session? And just type in yes or no, or maybe sort of. Those are kind of like the three options. Have you ever thought about building your career brand before? Is this something that you are thinking about for the very first time? Or is it something that you've always thought about, but you just were never sure how to approach it? So maybe it's a bit of sort of. So I'm seeing some of you are saying, yes, I have thought about building my career brand. No, not really. A lot of you are saying yes, sort of, Dan. Yes, Terry. Yes, Laura. Yes. Okay. I love this. We have a lot of very proactive folks in here, which is fantastic. So let me say, whether you are the 100% yes, or you're just like a sort of, or you're like, absolutely, I've never even heard of that word before, wherever it is that you are right now, everything that I'm going to be sharing with you can help enhance and elevate where you are. Because whether you are already thinking strategically, I guarantee there's more things we can absolutely do to help refine That's the thing. Refine how we are perceived by other people. So, thank you all for sharing. Some of you are saying, nope, it's my first time, sort of, but I kind of struggle with it. I hear you. Like I said, a lot of us were not taught to think about our career brand and our work this way, but that is why we're all here. So, let's continue. Okay, let me first start off by talking about why it doesn't come very naturally for us. Well, the truth is, it doesn't come naturally for us because of what I call many of us are living in what I call these world of dualities. What does this mean? This means that we know the working us, but we don't often think about the visible us. Now, I'm going to outline these two things. And if this resonates with you, put it into the chat function if you're like, absolutely, I can see myself in this. So I'm going to explain the two differences. Many of us were raised to work hard, to make sure that we go into work and we do good work, that we're a good team player, that we hit our deadlines, right? This is what is the working us. You see it here. We got to hit our deadlines. We got to meet our goals. We got to turn things in on time, and we have to be a good contributor. For many of us, we were raised with these hardworking principles, including myself. My parents were immigrants here to the US, and for them, they were like, we sacrifice so much for you that we want to make sure that you are constantly working just as hard because we want to make sure you're succeeding. So these were some of the things that I remember my parents would always tell me. So of course, when I started working, it was about putting my head down and doing the work. And I took it seriously. But I think for many of us, it doesn't take long to see that it's not just working hard, it's also this other side, the visible us. Meaning, do you see here? When people at work see us, do they recognize the work that we do? Do they know the contributions that we're making? Are we able to advocate for ourselves? And perhaps most importantly, how do we make sure that we are top of mind? Being top of mind is how we can make sure that when the big opportunities happen, or when there's a meeting happening, and let's say we're not in that meeting, do people think of us and say our names? Because we know in the working world, a lot of times decisions are made in meetings that we're not necessarily in. Do people remember us? Do they remember the work that we're doing? This is what I mean about being in these world of dualities, that sometimes we just live in this world of we work hard, right? Yes, we do work hard. And this is especially true for a lot of my technical and analytical folks. You are so smart at what you do. You're so good at what you do, but you cannot necessarily think about how do I position myself to talk about the work that I do? That is the visible us. So, this is a very important way to start off this talk because, in order for us to have this, I see that is just as important, that is how we can start to build those skills because everything I'm going to be talking about today is the visible us. I have no doubt many of you are working so hard. But many of us don't have the time to really think about the visible us. And that is why we're talking about our career brand today. Because here's the truth, if you are invisible, if people don't know what you're doing, if people don't see you, like they know that you're working, but they don't really know what you're doing, that means you're basically invisible. And in the working world, this is the truth. Perception is reality. It does not matter how hard you work, which again, you all are working hard. If people don't recognize it and they don't appreciate it or they don't see the value in it, and here's the thing, sometimes you have to be the one to talk about it so they see it. Because in the working world, we're all busy, right? Our managers are busy. Sometimes they don't always know what's going on, which is why advocating for ourselves and making sure people understand the value of it is so incredibly important because perception is reality. How many of us have those coworkers who were like, dang, like I'm doing way better work, but they seem to be getting all the credit. It's probably because they know it's really about being visible. I certainly have felt that way before where I'm like, wait a second, I'm working twice as hard. I'm staying overtime. I'm doing extra work. But why is it that like it seems like my manager always is like gravitating towards them. Gosh, it's probably one of the worst feelings, right? But again, we don't think about this, which is why we're talking about career brand. So, let me share with you a really quick story about how this came to light for me and this idea of staying top of mind. So, you know how earlier I mentioned that I used to be a television journalist? So, there was one time where we had our meeting as a team, and my boss had mentioned that the US Thunderbirds, they were coming into town. So for those of you who are not familiar, they're an air flight squadron. So they go from city to city and they do performances. So it's usually an event for families where all these planes fly together and you can go and watch them as a family. A lot of kids really love it. So as a journalist, we had the opportunity. They were going to let one person, one reporter fly with them. Okay, I'm not scared of, like, heights or anything like that. So when I heard that they were gonna allow one reporter at our office go with them, I told my boss I would love to be the one to ride with them. And I remember my manager goes, "Okay, Jessica, no worries. We will get you a media pass." To the day before the event comes, we're all sitting in the editorial meeting again. And then my manager is going through the story. He says, "Okay, the Thunderbirds, they're coming tomorrow. Um, Brooke, you're going to be doing the story." You know that feeling when you're like looking forward to something so bad and you were thinking about it and how you're going to do it? Because I had about 2 weeks to think about this. I was just thinking about how I was gonna do it, and it's like somebody just, like, pulled it and yanked it away from me, and it's like my heart just sank to my stomach. You know, it's like, again, that feeling of you wanting something and it was pulled away. So, at that point, it bothered me so much, like, I wasn't really sure why was a project handed off to somebody else. So, at the end of the meeting, I walked over to my manager and I was like, "Hey, Matt, just curious, why is Brooke doing the story? I mentioned that I had wanted to do it." I remember this so clearly. My manager turns to me and he goes, "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. It was just Brooke, she kept talking about this and she was just top of mind." Now, I truly feel like my manager wasn't being like malicious or anything. I think it was just human nature. My colleague Brooke, she had no problems being visible. She probably spent the few days before this event talking about how excited that she was and everything. And my boss heard that. For some reason, I thought just asking for something one time was enough. But that's the thing. Sometimes it's not. And we have to get really good about talking about the things that we do because if not, opportunities will just be given away. So I share this, it's a very personal story. I share this story because this was a huge aha moment of why I was like, wait a second, we have to think about being top of mind. So for me, I had to reframe how I thought about talking about my career, talking about my work. And that is essentially why we're here because a lot of us are like, okay, I get it. And I feel what you're saying, Jessica, but how? How do I actually do this? So, I'm going to share with you a few strategies and I'm going to link it back to communications because that's what I teach. So, I'm going to share with you how you can think about working. And this, it doesn't matter if you're introverted or extroverted. I'm going to share with you how you can talk about your work so that people understand and it can be powerful and influential. So, there's going to be two things I'm going to be sharing with you today. Number one is this: I'm going to be teaching you how to build credibility. Credibility in the workplace is so important because it's what people think of you when they hear your name. Are you just somebody who can get work done, or are you somebody who can get work done and add value? That's credibility. The second part is I'm going to be talking about advocating for yourself. So this is now we're entering part 2 of our time together today. I'm just going to share really quickly. I'm going to be getting real tactical, meaning I'm going to be sharing exactly the communication strategies. So if this is the first time you're joining one of our lives, I want to share here's a QR code because we send you all the notes from our events, including all the things I'm going to be talking about here today. It's what we call our VIP communications pass. It's going to include the notes from today, as well as actually notes from all our other events that we host here. So if you cannot attend our future events or just time and scheduling conflict, you won't ever miss the things that I'm sharing during these events because we basically send it all to you in these notes, which is inside our VIP communications pass. And the QR code is right here. So if you didn't get a chance to write down what I'm about to share with you, everything we're going to be sending it to you. It's this QR code, or you can just go to soulcastmedia.com/VIP and it'll get you to the VIP pass. Okay. So let's get started about talking about building credibility and advocating for yourself. And what are the communication skills that are needed to help get you there? All right, let's first talk about some misconceptions. This is how we can set the foundation. A career brand isn't about being agreeable. Now, this is a really important point. Many of us want to be liked. Many of us want our team, our manager to think we're a team player. Of course, right? But it doesn't mean saying yes all the time to the things people hand to us. Because many of us sometimes will find that if we say yes to too many things, too many small things, that suddenly we become that default person. And time is valuable, right? If we say yes to too many things, we are also saying no to other things indirectly because our time is limited. So let me just say, being agreeable and saying yes is not really a career brand. Another thing, just doing the work is also not a career brand. Remember how I talked about the working us and the visible us? Well, the working us, it's expected, right? We go into work and we, of course, we are expected to do the work, but just doing the work isn't a career brand. Anybody can be hardworking. I mean, everybody should be hardworking, right? But that's actually not a career brand. Here's another thing. We cannot assume people will know what we're doing. Like I talked about earlier, right? For me, I thought just saying something one time was enough. Gosh, that was a shock because I was like, wait a second, no, you have to talk about your work because you cannot assume people will know. The thing is, people need to see you and see the good work that you're doing to know the good work that you're doing. Do you see it here? People have to see the good work that you're doing to know the good work and the impact that you're having. I'm just going to let that internalize and just kind of settle for a little bit. These are the career brand misconceptions that we just got to get rid of. Okay, now that we've got rid of that, let's talk about what do you need to do to build a credibility in the workplace? All right, in the communications world, we say you need two things. Number one, you need to prioritize what we call mission critical work. Mission critical work basically is work that's the things that you want to do, things that have good ROI, right? Things that can help you get to that next level job, help you elevate a certain skill, mission critical work. But not just that. Building credibility also requires you to do this: communicate the process. You see, I'm always linking it back to communications. A person who can build credibility in the workplace is very mindful about taking on mission critical work, but also being proactive in talking about what they're doing and what is going on. So, in the present, what is going on? It is a never ending process, and you constantly have to be thinking about this and finding opportunities to exercise both of them. If you're writing this down or you're thinking about this, let me dive into more details of what this means, starting with mission critical work. So, how do you identify mission critical work? Well, these are projects that will help bolster how you want to be seen. If you want to be seen as an expert in this, if you want to be seen as somebody who knows this skill or have this ability, you have to take on those projects that will help bolster. So many of us get hired for a specific role, right? And we go in, we do the job. But maybe after a few years, we're like, I'm kind of interested in expanding my expertise and maybe learning a little bit more about something else, right? For many of us, this is that growth mindset. And many of us, maybe a few years in, we start thinking about what else, right? So if this is maybe where you're at right now, you want to look around and see, who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to connect with? What kind of even like volunteer work can I do to build up this skill? Which is why you have to ask yourself these questions. What do you want to be an expert in? How do you want to be seen? Are you currently doing work at your organization, in your group, in your department that will bolster that? Who can you connect with that can help mentor or sponsor you to help you find those opportunities? What can you do? Now, this is where I have to say, for my women who are here and watching right now, we do have to be extra careful because for many of us, and this is not a statistic that I'm just sharing. This is something that's research has done, that many times it is the women who get thrown what we call the office housework. It's those like little projects of like planning parties or organizing this event that doesn't necessarily help give us that expertise. But we do it because, of course, we want to be nice and helpful, and that's great. But we have to be mindful of not taking on too much of that because why? Time. Our time is limited. So, this is just for my women out there. You have to be thinking about this because any office housework takes away from time of doing mission critical work. Because here's the thing, we talk about perception. Every action counts. Every project that you do, everything that you say yes to, when people see it, they start to identify you as that being the work that you do. I wish they taught us this honestly in school a little bit more, but I think this is very important in being more strategic in the workplace. So let's talk about communicating the process. Communicating the process basically means being proactive. How can you keep people up to date with what you are doing? Now, for many of us, it's easy to do this when it's good news. It's easy to talk about work when there's good stuff happening. But when we have bad news, we have to think about this as well. So when it comes to good news, what do we say? Well, right now, it might be like, hey, FYI, I just want to let you know, I want to give you a quick update, right? When something good is happening, we do this because we're happy too. But like I said, when it comes to bad news at work, when things are not going as planned, we actually have to double down on communicating. Now, for many of my maybe more shy, timid, and introverted people, many of us are like, we hate conflict, right? We don't like conflict. We rather avoid conflict and confrontation. So what does that mean? We might just try to like fix it ourselves. We might just kind of like put our head down and maybe the problem will just go away. How many of us feel that way? So when bad news happens, sometimes we can default to that. But like I said, communicating the process, you got to double down, especially when it's bad news. How do you do this? Well, you have to think about context. You have to set people's expectations and you have to offer solutions. This is it. Write these 3 points down. It's thinking about if there's bad news happening, things are not going as planned. How can you think about what do people know already? What do I need to inform them on? What information can I share with them? How do I set their expectations? Because we know in the working world, when expectations and reality, when they don't mesh, that's when people start getting surprised, disappointed, and what happens? People then look bad, right? So, how can you set people's expectations? And more importantly, how can you offer solutions? You don't want to be the kind of person who's like, this is all the problems. You want to think, these are the problems, and this is what I've already thought about as some ways we can move forward. Solutions. The key here is if you can exercise context, set expectations, offer solutions, when you're communicating the process, this, this is how people begin to trust your judgment. I talk to a lot of leaders, and they always tell me that when they assign people projects, even though they know it's a challenging project, they rather assign it to a person who might be a little less experienced, but they trust that they will communicate to them when things don't go right. People are more hesitant to give somebody something to do if they feel like that person won't communicate when trouble happens. And in the working world, things don't always go as planned, right? So think about that. If you want to think about building credibility, you have to think about how can you communicate the process in good times and in bad times. Okay. This is the final part of advocating for yourself. And let me share with you what I think about advocating. We got to get out of the mindset of thinking it's not self-serving. Advocating for yourself is not self serving. It's also not selfish. You advocate because you care about the work that you're doing. For many of us who come from more, conservative or even more humble backgrounds, right? The thought of boasting, talking about yourself, relishing in your work and praising yourself, it is so uncomfortable. It's not in our nature to do that. I understand. I talk about this a lot. And for many of us, it's not about not being humble, it's about reframing humility. You can still talk about the work that you're doing. You got to talk about the work that you're doing, but how can you do it in a way that doesn't feel so just about yourself? That is why, and this is what I talk a lot about here on LinkedIn. I'm just touching upon it right now today. But it's like, how can we think about talking about our work, even though it may not feel the most natural for us? This is how I want you to reframe it. The work that you're doing, it's great. You are doing work that, of course, hopefully you're enjoying, but there's actually a bigger impact to it. Every small thing you do at work, there's a greater impact. Communicate that impact. Let me say that again. Communicate that impact to other people. When you can reframe that humility to think about others and the impact, it feels less about yourself and like, oh, look at me, because it's not about looking at me. It's about, hey, this work that I'm doing, look at how darn amazing it is for the team, for the organization, for our clients, right? These are just some examples. If you can frame it that way, people will see, wow, I can see what you're talking about. Okay, but then here's the thing. Advocating for yourself also requires you to talk about your work. It also requires you to ask for things that won't necessarily be handed to you. Now, I'm going to share with you a communications strategy right now. It's called Mastering the Ask, and it's actually a framework. And by the way, when I share this framework with folks, people love writing this down because it is applicable to anything that you're doing in the workplace. So when you want to ask for something, which is part of advocating for yourself, because we cannot assume people will always give us what we want. We have to ask for it. How can we ask for something in a way that feels more natural and comfortable? This is where I want to introduce to you. Do you see it? It's called the SAW framework. And it is how you want to structure your communications so people understand the value quickly. The S starts with strong case. The A is now align objectives, and the W is now why you. Take a look and internalize this. The SAW framework is how you can structure your communications when you're asking for something so people understand why you're asking for it and the value. So if you want to use this framework, you have to ask yourself a few questions. When you first start off your ask or your communications or your talking, you have to answer these questions. Why are you asking for this right now? Why right now? Timeliness is very important. If you want to be a strategic communicator, you have to answer why now and who is it going to benefit and why. By the way, if I'm going through this too fast, get our VIP communications pass because this is where we share with you all the notes from today's event. Why now? Who will it benefit and why? If you answer those questions and you start off with that, people will understand, oh, I see what you're saying. Next, align objectives. Now we know anytime we're asking our manager for something, they're thinking about budget, the cost, money, time, resources, right? They're always thinking about that. If we can answer that question, it makes our ask so much stronger. So, where will the money, the time, the resources, where will that come from? Answer that. What is the ROI, the return on investment? You're asking for this. How is it going to benefit the team or the organization? If they give this to you, right, whatever it is that you want, how is it going to benefit? And then finally, the W. Why are you asking for this? Now you loop in you. This is where you have to answer. Why are you the right fit? Why do you want to do this? Many of us, when we ask for something, we start with the why us, right? But if we want to be a strategic speaker, we have to think about it a little bit differently. We have to reverse. Start off with a strong case, align objectives, and then why you. That is the SAW framework. Oh my goodness, didn't this time go by so fast? I hope you all are enjoying this workshop. I love doing this and I love bringing this into different organizations to teach them how to think about their career, their communications a little bit more differently. So let's do a quick review of all the things I talked about today. I started by talking about credibility and how we can build it. We talked about finding and identifying those mission critical projects and communicating the process. And then I talked about advocating for yourself, which I just did, and using the SAW framework. But ultimately, a career brand is a mindset. It's not just the working us, it's also the visible us. What do people see when they hear our name? And I would sum up our career brand like this: being able to talk about our work, being able to care about the work that we do, knowing the impact it has on others, and finding ways to proactively communicate it to build visibility. That, my friend, is a career brand. And this is what we need to be thinking about in addition to the work and the hard work that we're putting in every day. Because again, and I cannot reiterate this enough, it is not enough to just work hard. Working hard is not a career brand. Working hard is expected. A career brand is how you want people to see you when they hear your name, when you walk into a room, when they see your name pop up in a Zoom meeting. They're like, oh, there's Bex, there's Dan, there's Jessica, there's Jennifer, Serene, right? Like that is what you want them to think about. And let me tell you, this is how I'm going to end today. If we don't invest the time in crafting our own career brand, other people are going to do it for us. I shared this earlier. Before you know it, we become that default person who just does that work. But it might not be the work we want to do. So that is what I mean. If we don't think strategically about our career brand, other people will create that career brand for us. So, with that, I just want to give a big thank you. I hope you all enjoyed today's workshop event about building your career brand. I hope you had as much fun listening and learning as much as I did teaching. Hopefully, you can tell I'm so passionate about this because this was not the kind of stuff that I learned, but I feel is so important. You know, we're all here on LinkedIn, we're all here thinking about work, our career, our job. And I feel like for you all to invest the time in learning, for me, my job is to make sure that you're getting the most out of this. So, like I said, we host these events every other week. So, quite often, actually, it's a different topic every single time. So if you want to stay in contact with us, if you want to be sure you don't miss an event, go to soulcastmedia.com/tips. That allows you to be in our newsletter and we share with you kind of like all our events there. So if we're not already connected, please join us on the soulcastmedia.com/tips. And that's where you can basically stay connected. And like I said, if you were like, oh my gosh, I did not get to take down all the notes from today, this is our VIP communications pass. And let me share, once you have a VIP communications pass, you actually have it for the rest of your life, meaning any events from here on out, you get all our notes. You get all our notes, you get all our tips, and honestly, it's kind of awesome. And if you liked my style of teaching and the way and kind of like how I approach work, I highly recommend you think about this because it's where you can get all the tips and strategies that I share. So, with that, I see all your names and thank you again all for attending. We're hosting another event, I think in about 2 weeks as well, here on LinkedIn. And like I said, just be sure to join our email list because that is where we kind of keep connected with you and tell you about it. And of course, connect with me here on LinkedIn. So, if you all have any questions that I did not get to answer, feel free to leave it in the chat. I'll do my best to try to answer it, or you can just direct message me. Let me know that you are here and I look forward to staying connected with you all. And if you all have any questions about more of the workshops that I do, the communications work that I do, you can just go to our website and it's soulcastmedia.com and it shares all the things that we do and the workshops that we hold. So, with that, it's so fantastic seeing you all. I know we had a global audience today. So, whether it's your morning, your evening, your midnight, I just want to say thank you. I hope you found this session super helpful because for me, this is my passion. I love teaching folks this. So, with that, I'll say I hope to see you at our next event. And in the meantime, take care, everybody.